On the coldest night of last January, when the thermometer outside a small church in Ohio read 4 degrees, the pastor did something he had never done in 30 years of ministry. He unlocked the sanctuary doors, dragged cots between the pews, and turned the house of worship into a shelter. By midnight, 17 people who would have slept on frozen sidewalks were asleep under the stained glass windows. But that pastor is not alone. All across America, in big cities and tiny farm towns, ordinary people are quietly building a safety net to make sure that this winter nobody freezes to death on their watch. And at the end of this story, you will hear the 9 words that Pastor gave when someone asked why he finally opened those doors. 9 words worth remembering. To understand why these efforts matter so much, you need to know a fact that stops most volunteers cold the first time they hear it. Winter is the single deadliest season for Americans living on the street. The National Coalition for the Homeless estimates that roughly 700 people experiencing homelessness die from hypothermia every single year in this country. 700 mothers, fathers, veterans, and grandparents gone quietly in doorways and under overpasses while the rest of us slept in warm beds. And the cold is sneakier than most of us realize. Doctors will tell you that hypothermia doesn't need a blizzard. It can set in at temperatures as high as 50 degrees if a person's clothing is wet and the wind is blowing. A rainy 40-degree night in Atlanta can be just as dangerous as a snowy night in Minneapolis. Once body temperature starts dropping, a person becomes confused and drowsy. They stop shivering. Many simply fall asleep and never wake up. The scale of the problem has never been bigger. In the most recent national count, more than 770,000 Americans were experiencing homelessness on a single night, the highest number ever recorded. A growing share of them are seniors. People in their 60s and 70s living out of kids in tents. Many worked their whole lives. One medical illness, one lost job, one rent increase, and they found themselves outside in January. Outreach workers in Chicago tell the story of a Vietnam veteran they found one February morning, wrapped in 3 soaked blankets in a bus shelter, so cold he could no longer speak. He'd worked as a machinist for 40 years. The team got him to a hospital and he survived, but the nurse who treated him said something that stuck with everyone. She said the blankets nearly killed him. They were soaked through and pulling the last of the heat out of his body. He would have been safer with nothing at all. But here's where this story turns, because while the numbers grew, something else grew right alongside them. A movement of everyday Americans who decided that whatever else happens, people freezing to death in the richest country on earth is simply not acceptable. And they didn't wait for Washington to fix it. It starts with something called Code Blue. If you live in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, or New York, you may have heard the term on your local news. When the forecast drops below freezing, counties declare a Code Blue emergency. Church basements open, recreation centers roll out cots, volunteers brew coffee at 2 in the morning. In New Jersey, it's actually the law. Every county is required to open warming centers when the temperature becomes life-threatening. A law passed after homeless residents died on the streets of Trenton, and communities across the state demanded change. On Code Blue nights, an entire hidden machine springs to life. Retired nurses volunteer overnight shifts. High school kids serve chili. Police officers and outreach workers drive slowly through downtown streets with a simple message. You don't have to stay out here tonight. There's a warm bed waiting. In one Pennsylvania county alone, volunteers logged thousands of overnight hours last winter. Most of them people over 60 who said they simply couldn't sleep knowing someone was outside in the cold. Volunteers, like Margaret, a retired school teacher who takes the midnight to 4 shift at her church's warming center every Friday. She sets out fresh coffee, warms blankets in the dryer, and greets every guest by name. When her daughter worried the work was too much for a woman of 74, Margaret gave an answer that's become something of a legend at that church. She said, "Honey, I taught third grade for 35 years. I can certainly handle a room full of grown-ups who just want to sleep. However, warming centers only work if people make it through the night to reach them. And that's where one young woman in Detroit changed everything." Her name is Veronica Scott. Back in 2010, she was a broke design student at Detroit's College for Creative Studies when a professor gave her class an unusual assignment: design something that fills a real need. While her classmates sketched gadgets, Veronica spent months visiting homeless shelters in one of the coldest cities in America, asking people what they actually needed. The answer came from the streets themselves: warmth that moves with you. So she invented a coat unlike anything on the market, a heavy-duty winter coat that transforms into a waterproof sleeping bag at night and folds into an over-the-shoulder bag in the summer. Homeless men and women helped her test the early versions in Detroit's brutal winters. One woman famously stood outside a shelter and yelled at Veronica that she didn't need a coat. She needed a job, and instead of getting defensive, Veronica listened. That moment changed the whole mission. She founded a nonprofit called the Empowerment Plan and made a decision that still gives people chills. The coats would be sewn by parents hired directly out of Detroit's homeless shelters at full pay, with training and support to rebuild their lives. Making the coat would end homelessness for the very people sewing it. 15 years later, the numbers are hard to argue with. The Empowerment Plan has distributed tens of thousands of these coats across all 50 states, handed out through shelters and outreach teams from Detroit to Denver. Dozens of formerly homeless parents have graduated from the program into permanent housing and stable careers. Children who once slept in shelters have watched their mothers become seamstresses, team leaders, and homeowners. One employee said that sewing each coat feels like sending a warm hug to a stranger she'll never meet. The coat itself is a small marvel of practical design. The outer shell is made from durable, water-resistant fabric donated by companies like Carhartt and General Motors, the same tough material used in workwear and car insulation. It's built to survive years of hard outdoor use, and when the weather warms up, the whole thing folds away so the owner isn't carrying a heavy winter coat through July. People who received one years ago still stop Empowerment Plan workers on the streets of Detroit just to show them the coat is still going strong. And Veronica's coat is just the beginning of American ingenuity on this front. Some of the most touching innovation is coming from grandmothers with crochet hooks. In church fellowship halls and senior centers from Nebraska to North Carolina, groups of retired women gather every week around folding tables, piled high with something unexpected: plastic grocery bags, thousands of them. They flatten the bags, cut them into strips, and loop the strips into a kind of yarn they call plarn, short for plastic yarn. Then, hour after patient hour, they crochet that plarn into sleeping mats for the homeless. It takes around 700 plastic bags and more than 50 hours of handiwork to finish a single mat. But the result is remarkable. The woven plastic creates a cushioned, waterproof barrier between a sleeping person and the frozen ground, which is exactly where the body loses heat fastest. The mats are lightweight, easy to roll up and carry, and they can be hosed off and dried in minutes. Outreach workers say people on the street treasure them. One group of ladies in Omaha, most of them in their 70s and 80s, has produced hundreds of mats. Their unofficial motto is that arthritis slows them down, but it doesn't stop them. And there's a lovely hidden bonus to the whole project. Every mat keeps around 700 plastic bags out of landfills, which means these ladies are quietly protecting God's creation and their neighbors at the same time. Then there's the movement that turned winter kindness into a kind of guerrilla art. It's called Chase the Chill, and it started when a woman in Easton, Pennsylvania began tying hand-knitted scarves to lampposts, park benches, and fence railings in public places. Each scarf carries a small tag with a simple message: "I am not lost. If you're cold, take me." No paperwork, no questions, no shame, just warmth, free for the taking. The idea spread to towns across the country, and now every December, knitting circles scarf bomb their downtowns overnight. Residents wake up to find their town squares wrapped in color. By New Year's, most of the scarves are gone, wrapped around necks that needed them. The same spirit shows up in front yards across the heartland in the form of little wooden boxes on posts. You've probably seen the little free libraries filled with books. Well, neighbors have started building blessing boxes instead, small weatherproof pantries stocked with canned food, and in winter, gloves, wool socks, knit hats, and hand warmers. The rule painted on most of them says it all: take what you need, leave what you can. In one Kansas town, widows like Carol keep their blessing boxes stocked all winter in memory of their late husbands. Carol says she's never once seen who takes the items, and that's exactly how she likes it. Dignity, she says, means not having to ask. Some mornings, she finds a thank you note tucked under the door of the box, written on the back of a receipt, and she keeps every single one in her husband's old cigar box on the mantle. Which brings us to the people doing perhaps the hardest work of all: the street outreach teams who go looking for those who can't or won't come inside. Every freezing night, in nearly every American city, small teams of volunteers and social workers head out on foot with backpacks full of supplies, checking on people in encampments, doorways, and parked cars. And what they carry has been refined by hard experience: hot coffee and soup, dry wool socks because wet feet are the fastest road to frostbite, chemical hand warmers, and increasingly, one item that veteran outreach workers call the single most important piece of gear in the bag: a compact emergency thermal bivvy, basically a full-body sleeping bag made of reflective material that bounces the body's own heat back instead of letting it escape into the night air. The reason is simple: physics. A donated cotton blanket feels kind, but once it soaks through with rain, snow, or even sweat, it actually pulls heat away from the body. Remember the veteran in Chicago whose soaked blankets nearly took his life. A sealed thermal bivvy does the opposite. It blocks the wind, keeps moisture out, and reflects up to 90% of a person's body heat back to them with no batteries and no fire risk. The whole thing weighs a few ounces and packs down smaller than a soda can, which means an outreach volunteer can carry a dozen of them in one backpack. And honestly, this is a tip worth borrowing for your own family too. A lot of the volunteers we came across keep 2 or 3 of these thermal bags in their glove box year-round. One to hand to someone they see sleeping outside on a bitter night, and one in case their own car ever breaks down on a winter road far from help. The one that kept coming up in our research is called TerraShell. It's the same style of reflective thermal bag the outreach teams use, sturdy enough not to tear, and small enough to forget about until the night you desperately need it. If you'd like to take a look at it for your car or for someone you care about, just tap the description right under this video and you'll find the link waiting for you there. Because there's a truth every outreach worker eventually learns: warmth you can hand to somebody in 30 seconds saves lives that same night. But the volunteers will also tell you that handing out supplies, as vital as it is, was never meant to be the finish line. The finish line is a front door with a lock on it. And in Austin, Texas, one man has built the most extraordinary proof of that idea in America. His name is Alan Graham, a former real estate developer who spent years driving a food truck to Austin's homeless camps through a ministry called Mobile Loaves and Fishes. After thousands of conversations on curbsides, Alan came to a conclusion that would reshape his whole life. Housing alone doesn't heal people, he says. Community does. So he bought land on the edge of the city and started building a neighborhood. Today, it's called Community First Village, a 51-acre community of tiny homes, gardens, and workshops that houses hundreds of people who spent years, sometimes decades, on the streets. Residents pay modest rent, earned through on-site jobs at the community's blacksmith shop, art studio, market, and organic farm. There's an outdoor movie theater. There are chickens, chapels, and front porches where neighbors in their 60s and 70s sit and visit in the evening. Some of the residents who once slept under Austin's bridges have now lived at the village for years, and hundreds more homes are under construction as the community expands. Visitors from cities all over the country tour it every week, hoping to copy the model back home. What strikes visitors most isn't the tiny houses. It's the winter mornings. When a cold front rolls through Austin, nobody at the village is scrambling for a doorway or a bridge. Residents who once spent freezing nights wondering if they'd see the morning now wake up under quilts, put the kettle on, and walk to the community kitchen for breakfast with friends. One longtime resident, a man in his 70s who lived on the streets for over 20 years, told a reporter that the first winter in his little home, he kept waking up at night just to enjoy the feeling of being warm. For cities that can't wait years to build, a company in Everett, Washington called Pallet found another answer. They manufacture small, insulated personal shelters, each with a locking door, a heater, and a bed that can be assembled in under an hour. When a cold snap is coming, a city can raise an entire heated village of them on a parking lot in a matter of days. Dozens of communities from California to Massachusetts have open pallet villages, and the company itself hires people who have experienced homelessness and incarceration to build the units. The founder likes to say they're building shelters for their own former selves. And woven through all of these big efforts are the quiet heroes hardly anyone ever notices. In Chicago, on the most dangerous nights, heated city buses park near encampments and simply idle until sunrise, engines humming, doors open so anyone can climb aboard and sleep warm. In hundreds of towns, the public library has become the unofficial daytime warming center, and librarians have learned to greet their regulars by name, point them to the coffee, and quietly connect them with social workers, mail carriers, and utility workers. The people who walk our streets every day have started calling in wellness checks when they notice someone sleeping outside as temperatures fall. There are barbers who set up folding chairs in parks to give free haircuts on warm afternoons because they say a person who feels human fights harder to stay alive. There are diner owners who quietly run a wall of prepaid coffees where customers buy an extra cup for whoever needs one. None of these people signed up to fight homelessness. They just refuse to look away. So what about you? Because if there's one thing every volunteer in this story agrees on, it's that this work doesn't require wealth, youth, or special training. It requires exactly the kind of people watching this video. Here are 5 simple things that make a real difference this winter. First, find out if your county has a Code Blue program or warming center and put the phone number in your contacts. The next time you pass someone outside on a freezing night, one call can bring an outreach team to their exact location. Second, when you donate winter clothing, think socks first. Warm socks are the most requested and least donated item at almost every shelter in America. Third, keep a couple of care kits in your car, a pair of gloves, hand warmers, a granola bar, and yes, one of those compact thermal bags, so kindness never has to wait for a better moment. Fourth, If you knit, crochet, or sew, your hands are needed. Plarn mat groups, scarf projects, and quilting circles are running in nearly every state, and most meet in churches and senior centers you already know. And fifth, the simplest one of all, learn one name. Volunteers say the moment everything changes is the moment a person on the street stops being a stranger and becomes Bill or Denise or Walter. A woman who has run a warming shelter in Missouri for 20 years puts it this way. She says nobody has ever frozen to death in a town where somebody knew their name. And now, the 9 words we promised you. That pastor in Ohio, the one who dragged cots between the pews on a 4-degree night, was asked afterward why he finally opened the doors after 30 years. His answer was only 9 words, because I couldn't pray in there knowing they were out here. 17 people slept warm that night because one man decided the cold was his problem too. Across this country, thousands of Americans are making the same quiet decision in church basements and sewing rooms, in glove boxes and tiny home villages. They can't fix everything, but they can make sure that on their street, in their town, on their watch, nobody freezes. If stories like this one restore a little of your faith in your neighbors, hit subscribe, because every week we share the everyday Americans doing extraordinary good. And there's one on your screen right now that we think you'll love about the small town that came together to rebuild a veterans home in a single weekend. Go ahead and click it. We'll see you there.